good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for Networking Without Borders, building your network in a remote world. I'm Greg Berry, Director of Communications in the Office of Alumni Affairs. Since we're virtual, please excuse issues that may pop up. If you have problems with video or audio, click Reconnect to get back to the webinar right away. As we begin, I'd like to engage our audience with a quick question. How often do you engage in remote networking activities? You should see the answer options on the screen: daily, weekly, monthly, rarely, or never. I'm going to go ahead and leave the question up for a few moments so you can submit the response that best reflects you. For our live audience, we are recording this webinar. You'll be able to access it online after it's uploaded onto our website. And once it's ready, you'll get an email with the link. Let me go ahead and flip over here as I continue to roll along and introduce our guest today. We are excited to welcome back Dr. Alan Gorman to our webinar series. Dr. Gorman is Associate Professor of Management and Chair of the Department of Management, Information Systems, and Quantitative Methods in the UAB Collat School of Business. He earned his BA from the University of Georgia, MA from the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and PhD from the University of Tennessee. This is the third time that we have welcomed Dr. Gorman for a webinar. Back in 2023, he joined us for Adulting 101, From the Classroom to the Boardroom, and last June, he returned for Workplace Toxic Avengers Unite, how to recognize toxicity in the workplace and what to do about it. You can rewatch both of those by visiting alumni.uab.edu/videos. We also will have him back in a month and a half for Leading with Heart, the Power of Compassionate Leadership on March 26th. You can register for that webinar at alumni.uab.edu/events. So looking at the poll question, I'm going to go ahead and end that. 42% of our audience rarely engages in remote networking activities. 17% daily, weekly, followed close in fourth by monthly at 14%. I also have another poll, and I want to go ahead and ask that to our audience. Let me slide over to that. And with that, I am going to ask, here we go. What is the primary benefit you seek from remote networking? Career advancement, knowledge sharing, business opportunities, social interaction, or something else? And you can drop that answer in the chat. So at this point, Dr. Gorman, after that lengthy introduction, I'm going to turn things over to you. The show is yours.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Let's see. I'm not seeing my slide.
There you are.
All right.
You're good to go.
All right. Thank you, Greg, and thank you to the audience for joining. I really appreciate it. I really enjoy the opportunity to share with the Alumni Network. So I'm excited to talk today about remote networking. When I think about networking, or a lot of people think about networking, a lot of folks have this kind of idea in mind of this meme here of the room on fire and everything is fine, and we're pretending that this is normal, and we're trying to adjust to whatever the networking event or whatever type of networking you might be involved in. That's typically what we think. A lot of our students think about networking. They're very hesitant. They're very skeptical of networking, and we're going to talk about why. But I'm going to convince you today why networking is useful, and then how can we take what we know about networking and have been doing for a long time and apply that to the virtual world in which we live today. So first of all, when we say networking, what's the definition of networking? How do we think about networking? Well, the most basic definition is we're really just building and nurturing relationships to create a system of information, contacts, and support that we think is important for career and personal success. And when I say networking, in the academic literature, we treat that as you can do that as both internal and external, right? Internal networking could be attending events at your workplace, attending information sessions, attending learning development sessions, where you're not only learning from other people, but you're engaging in social situations that contribute to your effectiveness in that workplace. And we're also talking about external networking, which we probably think of most often. When we think of networking, we think of going to some sort of networking event or some sort of meeting, or we go to a lunch and learn or something where we're engaging with other people and learning from other people. We know from the research that networking is effective. It can enhance our understanding of organizational practices, promote skill development, provide role clarity, provide clarity in our own profession in terms of learning what's going on in the profession, how other people are treating what we're doing in that particular role within the industry, within the profession. And in fact, there is quite a bit of research that has shown that networking appears to be very, very helpful for moving people's careers forward in terms of promotions, opportunities, all kinds of career benefits and career success linked to networking. But, one of the things I want to address before we move forward into this, because I think a lot of our students and maybe you all as alums recognize this as well, is a lot of people just really hate networking. And when I bring this up with my students, I see a lot of eye rolls. I see a lot of, oh gosh, networking. I don't want to have to do that. Why do we have to network? Like, what's that all about? And one of the things I wanted to do is dispel kind of the myths around networking and to show that, it feels it feels bad to network. In fact, there's research that shows that networking makes us feel dirty. We just don't like it. It feels kind of contrived. It feels transactional. It feels forced. It feels uncomfortable to a lot of us. And really that's because a lot of us just aren't used to doing those kinds of things and engaging in those kinds of situations, particularly our students. And if you think about it, I think about it similar to like public speaking. Most of us hate public speaking, right? In fact, if you look at the list of fears that people have, a big one is public speaking. They don't want to look dumb in front of other people. And it's just, there's a level of discomfort there. There's also a level of power difference that happens with networking, particularly at networking events, where it can make it feel like we're brown nosing, kissing butt. We're trying to use someone to raise our stature or raise our level in an organization or in our career. And I see a lot of my students these days, they really feel that way. As I hear comments like, well, that's really not fair. We shouldn't have to network to get a job. And one of the things I'll say is, fair or not, it's how a lot of careers are started. It's how a lot of jobs are obtained in our economy, is through this process of networking. We know from research that it's very, very difficult for introverts. I'm sure some of you on this call maybe have experienced that or felt that. A lot of my colleagues may not realize this, but I am very introverted, particularly when engaging in any type of setting where I'm interacting with other people. I can do it. I've conditioned myself over years now where I can do it for a certain amount of time, but then after that, I'm just absolutely drained, right? And then I have to retreat and recharge and all those things that you have to do if you're an introvert. So we know it's difficult for introverts, for people who already feel uncomfortable, and it just makes that even worse. Another thing I hear from people is, why should I go to this networking or do this networking thing when I don't see the payoff immediately? It takes work to see that payoff. And that payoff, one of the things I try to convince my students of it is you're not going to see that payoff immediately, right? When you go to some sort of networking thing, networking event, very rarely are you going to get offered a job right there as a result of going to that thing. So a lot of students think, well, I've never gotten a job that way, so why should I have to engage in any type of networking? And the point I try to make is, the payoff is not immediate. The payoff is down the road, right? The more you engage and build your network and invest your resources into your network, the more likely that networking is going to pay off in the long run. But it's definitely not going to happen in the short run. You have to. It's a marathon, not a sprint when it comes to networking. But the more time and energy you put into that, the bigger the payoff will be in the long run. So, but we do in general, our society, there's a lot of angst around this process of networking if you're not used to it and you're not used to doing that. But the thing I stress with my students is, look, networking is really you're just building relationships, right? You're meeting new people. You're building a relationship with people you may not know. These people can help you, or they might not be able to help you immediately, but maybe in the long run. It might be somebody who can serve as a mentor to you, somebody who might be able to help you out in terms of having career conversations, learning more about the industry or your particular career. It might be somebody who can be an ally for you, an advocate for you, somebody you can just get job advice from. You have a question about something going on at your job, or you want to learn more about another job or something similar within a different part of the industry, or just simply meeting someone who may or may not be able to help your career advancement in the future. And again, the payoff is not going to be immediate. The payoff is going to be in the long run. But the key word there that I want to emphasize is this idea of relationships. You're just meeting new people. You're just developing relationships, and you're trying to nurture those relationships. And I always go back to, if it feels dirty, it's probably because you're doing it wrong, or you don't have the experience to understand what the process is like. And if you treat it as though I'm trying to network just to get a job, then it's always going to feel dirty, and it's always going to feel like I'm not getting a payoff out of this. But if you reframe that into, all I'm trying to do is build relationships. I'm just trying to meet new people who might be able to help me at some point down the road. I don't know if they will or not, but it might be beneficial in the long run. If you treat it that way, you're a lot more likely to get meaningful, long-lasting relationships within your network. So that's one of the things I want to clear up before we get into specific activities is the idea that networking doesn't have to feel dirty. It doesn't have to feel contrived. It's how we approach it that makes a difference in how we think about it. But again, I probably don't have to convince this audience, but I say this a lot with my students, but you really should be networking. Why? Well, we know from the research, 85+% of jobs are filled through networking. One of the things I talk with my students about is the fact that most jobs are never actually advertised. You never actually see them in any type of job posting because they're either obtained internally or they're obtained through people who know people who know people who get access into that organization. Most jobs simply, you're never going to see them on some sort of job site. They are typically obtained through some type of internal or external networking. Now that's an uncomfortable statistic for a lot of people because they don't like to hear that. They want to say, well, I did a job search like everybody else, and I found this job and I applied and, went through the whole process like everybody did. But here's the thing, and this is something I stress to my students as well. People just don't know you yet. They don't know you if you're a new student starting out or a new alum starting out. They just don't have the chance to know you yet. So how are they going to know you from what's on a piece of paper in terms of your resume and in terms of what they see in a cover letter? People just don't know you. And especially in this day and age, which gets into this idea of remote networking, is the evidence shows that our employers are just flooded with tons of applications, especially with AI now. It's super easy to crank out a resume or crank out an application, put in some keywords, force it out there. Our employers are just absolutely flooded with all of these applications. How are you going to make yourself stand out compared to all of those applications that they're already getting? And the evidence shows that for every job that gets sent out now, hundreds, if not thousands, of applications are being received, especially from big companies, bigger multinational companies with high profile titles. It's just hard to stand out. The other thing I stress with my students is, whether or not you like networking or not, you're already doing it, right? You already have a network of friends. You already have a network of peers that you might work with, your professors that you've had classes with. They're in your network. If you had former coworkers, colleagues, former bosses, they're in your network. You've already engaged in networking, right? Simply by getting to know them and building a relationship in one way or another, you're already networking, right? So my question is always, the conversation, I share this with my students, the conversation's already happening, right? There are networking events constantly wherever you go. If we're in a city like Birmingham or a bigger city or smaller city, there's already networking happening. So my question to my students is, it's already happening out there. Why don't you just join in the conversation? Why don't you put yourself out there? Because if the conversations are already happening, you're missing out by not being a part of that conversation. So it doesn't hurt to put yourself into that conversation. And this is something that it's kind of a subtle point, but a lot of the obtaining of jobs, obtaining employment is having conversations. It's having conversations with people who have the jobs and connecting them to people who don't have the jobs. You're trying to get into that conversation, right? What's going on in the industry that you want to get into? People in that industry are already having those conversations. You're trying to get into having that conversation. So that's really what we're trying to do with networking, is we're trying to inject or insert ourselves into the conversation. So you've already been doing it, so keep doing it. And so here's some hopefully helpful ways to do that. Now, I know we're going to talk about remote networking, but I can't talk about networking without talking about networking events, because they still happen even in a post-COVID world. We still see networking events. We still see job fairs, career fairs within particular industries. There might be a mixer, a cocktail. In Birmingham, for example, this is a big tech area, at least when it comes to the School of Business. So Tech Birmingham is big for having networking events. There's a lot of things over at Innovation Depot. And the idea is there's a lot of people within that particular space in that industry, in this case, in this region, who share a lot of similarities. And we're trying to open the door for people to come in and have those conversations with each other. There might be some jobs, internships to be obtained, but that's not why you go and do it. You go and do it because you're trying to build those relationships that are going to be helpful, hopefully in the long run. So first and foremost, if you're looking to get a job in X industry, then join the professional organization for that particular industry, right? So for example, I'm the faculty advisor for the Society for Human Resource Management here at UAB. And I tell my students, you want a job in HR, you need to be a member of our local organization, the Birmingham Society for Human Resource Management. We have local meetings, we have get-togethers, we have mixers and cocktails. You need to be involved. Why do you need to be involved? Because they're already having those conversations. And the people who are engaged in that industry, they are a part of or want to be a part of an organization of people who are dealing with the same sorts of things that they're dealing with, and they want to learn and developing and grow from each other, right? So first and foremost, whatever that organization is, healthcare, tech, whatever, there is an organization for everything. So go join that organization, go to some meetings. There are plenty of people there who can help you out in many different capacities. When it comes to actually attending some sort of function or event, there's some really helpful tips. And I want to stress that this is not intended to be an exhaustive list. These are some things that I think are particularly helpful or could be helpful, especially if you're like me and you're on the introverted side. One of the things that I stress with all of our students, and this extends beyond networking, but just in life, be curious. If you are approaching a networking event or some sort of networking function, if you frame it as, I have to attend this to get a job, you're going to be disappointed. If you frame it as, I'm here to learn about the profession, the industry, careers in this industry, and I'm here to meet other people and learn from them, the more curious you are, the higher that level of curiosity that you have, the more likely that you're going to get something out of it, right? So number one is be curious. You're there to learn, right? And learning, I think, underlies all of this that we're talking about. We're simply trying to learn more. We're simply trying to learn, grow, and develop and build those relationships. So be curious in your approach. You want to learn. You want to learn from other people as a result of that. There's a couple of different approaches people can use in terms of networking. The one that I prefer and I use a lot is I want to go deep early. And what do I mean by that? Well, I don't really like going to a networking event and literally working the room where I go around to every single person and shake every single person's hand. If I go to an event, to me, that feels kind of like, stamp collecting. I'm there just to gather business cards and then leave, right? When I go to a networking thing, I want to meet a handful of people, but I want to meet them and I want to go deep early. I want to know more about them. I want to get to a deeper level in terms of knowing in our conversation so that I can get to know that one person better. And then if I get to know that person fairly well through that exchange, then we can follow up and I can have a follow-up meeting down the road. Now, that may mean that I miss out on some, networking opportunities in other parts of the room or parts of wherever the event is. To me, you're still going to have those opportunities because those people are probably still going to show up at future events or future opportunities. I would rather go deep early. And a great way to do that, I share this with my students. And I've got this in the list of materials from this. It's called 36 Questions for Increasing Closeness. And it's great for meeting someone for the first time, for having a conversation. We all know when we've been to networking events, it can be super awkward, right? And what we typically do is say, oh, hey, nice to meet you. What do you do? And then we're trying to think of questions beyond that, right? What I just showed you, it's a list of questions that go from relatively simple and it builds up to questions that really break down the barrier between you and another person. Those questions get successively more personal, right? And what I like to do is I want to know, how did you get into this profession? Why are you in this profession? How did you get this job? What about this job makes you tick? So these questions get successively more personal. One of my favorites, and I have my students do an exercise on this, is Have you achieved everything you want in life? If not, why not? Right? Now, notice that's I took that conversation to the next level, but I did it really quickly, and I can learn a lot about that person really fast, judging from their response, right? So by going deep early, we learn a lot about people really fast, and we can learn about, hey, is this person someone I really want to get to know better? And do I share similar characteristics where I can engage even further, and that could lead to a meaningful relationship beyond this particular event? So my preference is go deep early. An easy way somebody told me about many years ago is ask for people's top three. So sometimes I'll say, what's the top three things you like about your job, right? That's a simple question, but instead of just asking, hey, why do you like your job? Now I've asked you your top three. And when I ask for your top three, I'm asking you to think and categorize and organize and rank order. So that forces the other person to think, right? And now I have to think about that and really think about my response and find a reasonable response to that. We love it when people challenge us and make us think, right? That helps us really to know who's really trying to get to build a relationship versus who's just here to get something and a job and internship, and they don't really care about knowing anyone or developing a relationship. They're just here to get something and leave. So going deep early to me is important. If you find yourself at these events, one helpful thing that I have seen in the past is this idea of networking like a podcaster, right? So if you listen to podcasts, if you watch podcasts, with a podcast, you've got a host with some sort of guest, and they usually have a list of questions that they want to ask, right? So think about that networking experience as pretend you're hosting a podcast and you're trying to communicate what people might want to know about this particular person. So thinking of a list of questions that you have prepared ahead of time and asking everybody when you go to that event, if you want to ask people, the same three questions or whatever it might look like. But if you approach it as thinking like a podcaster, where you've got things that you want to learn and you want to learn these things from many different people or a handful of people at a particular event, can be helpful. Some good suggestions for if you are at networking events. One that I try to do is look for islands. When I say islands, when you show up at a networking event, there's usually like clumps of people, right? And they're more often than not, they're people who already know everybody. But there's usually some folks who are kind of standing off to the side, and there might be one or two of them, but it looks like they're kind of looking around the room and they don't really know anybody either. First thing I would do, boom, I want to go for those people because those people are looking to meet people. I'm looking to meet people. Look for those islands. Look for people that you can meet and who aren't already engaged in some deep conversation over here or a big group. There are people who are looking to meet, and they're probably on the introverted side as well if they're not talking to anybody already. So look for those islands and go ahead and introduce yourself to those people. And this is another, I think it's a pretty helpful one, especially if you're, again, on the introverted side. Make it a game. There's a whole science of gamification and how if you turn something into a game, it becomes competitive, which makes us more engaged and have more fun with it. And this is a really interesting suggestion in terms of think about networking as, I get more points for every person I meet. So maybe I go and meet as many different people as I can, and I try to build up a bank of points as if I was playing a video game or something like that. Now, again, that's not really my preference, but some people may be more interested in meeting lots of new people all at once. If that's your preference, then something like that may make it a little bit more helpful. Another good one that I think is helpful is asking. Most everybody in the professional world is either reading something or have read something that they can give a recommendation about. So an easy one is, hey, have you read a good book lately? Can you recommend something that you've read recently, and what would that be, right? And that gives us a lot of information about that person, right? You know what it is they're reading, but also, are they reading something that might be useful to me, right? If you're reading something that might be relevant to the industry or that career, is that something that I should be reading? Is that something that I should be, engaged with as someone who wants to get into this community? Some people are not big readers, so another question kind of similar is like, what are you watching, right? What are you binging? What are you watching on Netflix, right? That can give you some idea as to what someone's interests are, and then you can build questions from that. The other thing, and again, I've done this long enough, I kind of lean into this, is, I realize, the first time I meet somebody, it's always going to feel awkward, right? We're not generally used to that kind of thing. And what I have found is if you embrace that awkwardness, people appreciate that. And typically, if you're a younger student or a student trying to get into a career in industry, or maybe an alum, most people want to help other people with their career progression, with trying to get them industry. They would love to serve as a mentor. They would love to serve as an ally. Most people are more than happy to do that. But what we're really bad at is asking for help, right? So just embrace, if you have that level of awkwardness, embrace it and laugh about it and make fun of yourself and crack a joke about, oh, I don't usually love to come to these things, but here I am, something to kind of break down that barrier. And people appreciate that. They will recognize that. They'll recognize that they were there once. And people appreciate that level of vulnerability, and they appreciate when we're able to laugh at ourselves. So injecting some sort of sense of humor can be helpful. And the last, and again, it doesn't matter if you remember all these other things, but just be you, right? Just be you. That's the people that they want to meet at these events. The people that I want to meet when I go to events is I want to meet people who are authentically themselves. I don't want to meet somebody who's fake and just trying to get as many different handshakes as possible because that might help them get ahead or something like that. I want to just meet somebody who's just a genuinely authentic person. And most people feel the exact same way. So whatever your awkward traits, whatever that might look like, just be you. Bring that with you. Lead with that. Just be authentic. After you've gone to some type of networking event, this is where a lot of people really kind of drop the ball on this. You really need to be following up with people on this. If you meet someone, if you get their card, nowadays people don't have a lot of business cards because post COVID, people just stopped carrying them. So now I'll have like a name badge, my UAB badge, and then a lot of people now take pictures of it, and then they'll look you up based upon what they found. But whatever it is, connect with them on LinkedIn. And I'm going to talk a little bit about LinkedIn in terms of virtual networking, remote networking is huge, right? But people treat LinkedIn as just another social media site, and it's really not. You can really supercharge your networking through LinkedIn. I'm going to talk a little bit more about LinkedIn in just a second. Follow up with an email. Hey, it was great to meet you. I'd love to talk with you further. Maybe we can grab coffee, lunch. Email is fine nowadays. If it's really somebody that you want to impress or grease the wheels on, a handwritten note goes a long way. We know this from doing job interviews. If you participate in a job interview, always send a handwritten note thanking for the interviewer for their time. Why does that matter? Well, people don't take the time to do it anymore, right? An email super fast, you can fire it off real quick. Handwritten note, I can tell a lot about that person, that they took the time and effort to write a handwritten note, find my address, put a stamp on it, put it in the mail. That goes the extra mile. I mentioned requesting follow-up meetings if it's somebody you want to know. I'm a huge fan of meetings over some type of meal, right? Over coffee, lunch, cocktails, whatever. Sometimes breakfast meetings, people prefer that. And here's why. Everybody is equal on equal terms when they're sitting across from each other at a meal, right? Whenever we break bread together, we have broken down our barriers by being in the exact same position where we're eating or drinking something. We're all doing the same thing. That gets us out of a office space where you might have a desk and sitting across from the desk. If I have a meeting with somebody in my office, there's a very clear power differential, right? I'm in charge. I'm sitting behind the desk. You're on the other side of the desk. But when I meet with people in the community over coffee, lunch, whatever, that's sending a very clear signal that we're all on the same page here. We're all in the same boat. I'm trying to get to know you. You're trying to get to know me. It equals out all the power differential stuff. And I think that's really important. If you do set up a meeting, send an email ahead of time, just reminding the person that you want to meet with that, hey, I've met with you at this event. I just want to follow up. I'd like to meet again. Here's a little bit about me. And then, this is really important. And this is, again, another thing I stress with my students. After you've met with the person, always, always, always in that meeting with, is there somebody else I can talk to that you would recommend? Is there somebody in this career, in this industry that I need to meet? Do you have someone in your network that you can introduce me to, right? That always leaves you with whoever it is you meet. There's always another person that they might need to meet. What I have found is over time, you do this enough, eventually you start hearing the same names. Oh, you need to meet this person, right? That person probably knows a lot of other people and they can introduce you very quickly to a lot of people within their network, right? You always want to leave that meeting with something to take away. And an easy thing is just, is there somebody else I need to talk to? Or maybe even ask for 2 or 3 names. Hey, can you give me the names of 2 or 3 people that might be helpful for me to talk to? Okay, now we're going to dig deep on the remote world networking. When the pandemic hit, we all shifted to this kind of approach, and a lot of us got used to it very, very quickly. I have found a lot of people got sick of remote networking very, very quickly because they got tired of getting on Zooms, primarily because they've been doing it all day long at work. So they would rather have some sort of different approach to doing that. But it still happens. You can still approach networking in a remote world, but you have to treat it with the same level of expectation and the same level of respect that you would for typical networking. One of the easiest things you can do, you've already met a bunch of people in your life. You probably don't follow up with all those people regularly. One of the easiest things you can do, pull up your calendar. If you keep a calendar and you have like met with this person, had lunch, had coffee, flip back through your calendar and look at who have I not contacted in a long time. Would it be helpful for me to contact that person just to have a catch-up meeting, right? So this is what we call our dormant ties. These are people who are in our broader network, but we haven't connected with. It could be a long time. It could be a year. It could be 3 months, 6 months, whatever. I just got a text from a professor that I've known for a very long time saying, hey, we haven't touched base in a long time. We should hop on a Zoom and talk. I said, yes, let's do it. It wasn't even on my radar, but by having that connection, by reestablishing that connection, we're strengthening that tie, and that engages that process all over again. So one of the easiest things is just go back through your calendar, find people you haven't talked to, reach out to them, ask them if they want to get together, if they want to hop on a Zoom, whatever. those are a lot of good people already in your network. Ask someone to make an introduction for you. If you know that someone is connected to somebody else through, through the industry or career or whatever, if you know someone has those connections, ask them to make that connection for you. And particularly if you're a student, a recent alum, every professor you've had has those connections. If you've been in the business school, for example, we're all connected to a lot of people out here in the business community. So my students will say, hey, do you know somebody that works at X? Actually, I do. Let me make an introduction for you, right? Ask your professors if they know someone and would they be willing to make an introduction. I probably shouldn't have to tell all you this, but I tell my students this, and I'm still surprised. I'm telling graduating seniors, you need a LinkedIn account. If you do not have one, you need to get one, and you need to start putting stuff on there. LinkedIn will turbocharge any remote networking opportunities. The reason there's kind of a, people either love or hate LinkedIn, right? And the reason is they treat it just like any old social media. They get on LinkedIn and they treat it like Facebook, and they just scroll through and they like a few things and they're like, well, that's cool, but nothing here for me. The problem is you're not engaging with LinkedIn. There's a lot of, this is the thing I stress to my students, there is a lot of great content being offered on LinkedIn that's completely free. Links to articles, links to videos, links to books, original commentaries. What I tell people is engage with the content. Don't just like it and keep scrolling, but write a comment. Hey, let me tell you why I agree with what you just said, or I agree with this particular thing, and I'd love to learn more, right? What you're communicating with that person or the people who are reading that is that you're injecting yourself into that conversation, right? Remember what we said at the beginning? That's exactly what you're trying to do, is inject yourself into that conversation and continue that conversation. And through engaging with that conversation, you're building relationships. The other thing that I tell students, and I try to do this a lot on my own, you're probably creating something original that might benefit another person or could be useful for some other person to see. Post any original content, put it on your LinkedIn, right? There's a features part of LinkedIn where you can put, some project that you've written. If you were in a class and you created some sort of written content or some sort of written product, put that on your LinkedIn. That communicates to other people that I want to engage myself into the conversation around this area, right? So anything I do, I put that in that featured section. And that way, someone, if they happen to be scrolling through my LinkedIn, they can see, oh, here's some things that Dr. Gorman's involved with. Here are some things that might be an opportunity for us to connect with. So beyond that, the other thing, I stress with students, LinkedIn is crawling with recruiters. There are tons of recruiters on LinkedIn who are looking for talent for particular companies. So if they look at your LinkedIn and I can't tell anything about you from looking at this profile, they're going to move on to the next. But if your profile has all the buzzwords that are in your industry, I'm into X, Y, and Z, I'm looking to do this. When you create your about you part, try and put as much as you can in there about what makes you qualified for this particular career, this particular industry. Those recruiters, they're simply plugging in keywords and they're looking for profiles that match those keywords. The more matches you get, the more interest you'll get from some of these recruiters. And again, I've been doing this long enough. I'm not interested in going anywhere, but I will get interest from recruiters that say, hey, you may not be looking, here's an opportunity. And it might be something where you've got a job, you're very comfortable. It never hurts to know what the opportunities are out there in the world. So engage with LinkedIn, post original content, comment on people's engaging conversations, All of that will go a lot further than the typical LinkedIn user who just simply scrolls and scrolls. One thing I've done a lot in my career has been particularly helpful is if I see something I really like some professor's article, I'll reach out and I'll be, hey man, I read that piece that you just published in X Journal. That was awesome. Like, that's something that I would want to do, or I wished I had done that. And through that, I've actually made connections that I've gone on, and we've had conversations, and we said, hey, let's do research together on X topic, right? If you admire somebody's work, let them know. That lets them know that you're interested in learning more, you're interested in developing and building that relationship, and there might be a lot that can come out of that down the road. And then if you follow up with people and you don't hear anything, don't be afraid to follow up. This is something I see a lot of students is they'll say, well, I emailed so-and-so, and I say, how long ago? Well, like a month. Well, you need to be following up, right? A good rule of thumb for me is a couple of weeks. Give people a couple of weeks. Everybody is super busy these days. We've got a million things. My inbox is always flooded, and I tell my students, don't be afraid to ping me and follow up, especially when it's been a couple of weeks, because that puts it back at the top of my inbox, right? So if you don't hear back, follow up, but don't be overbearing. If someone's not responding, they either don't care, don't have the time, whatever. Don't be overbearing. Follow up maybe a couple of times. After that, let it go and move on, right? So if you don't hear something, follow up, but don't be that person that won't leave the person alone. Again, a little more on LinkedIn. I use it a lot to send messages to different people that I have never met in my life and no clue who they are, but I want to learn a little bit more about them. And LinkedIn is an easy way to do it. It's basically like a free website, right? I've got access to all this information about these people. So you want to send some message to these people, but you want to avoid what I call pick your brain messages. And I get these sometimes. Dr. Gorman, do you have an hour for me to pick your brain? Okay, well, what does that mean, pick my brain? I don't have a lot actually in my brain to pick anymore. What you want to do is be very specific about, hey, I saw your account, I saw your LinkedIn, I saw you're engaged in X, Y, and Z. I'd really love to schedule a call or a Zoom and talk to you a little bit more. I'm interested in that career. I'm an IO psychologist. I get tons of messages from students all the time. I want to learn more about IO. Would you mind if we met half an hour on a Zoom? Absolutely. I'd love to tell you a little bit more about the profession. Be specific, be upfront. Another easy thing is play up similarities. We know that from the research that we like people who have more similar interests and backgrounds than we do. So this is an example that came from the HBR article, but hey, I'm from the same area. I went to the same school. I did the same blah, 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 whatever it might be. Figure out what those similarities, lead with that, put that in your message. And that can get you a little bit more oomph when it comes to that networking component. And then I want to end off with, this is what we've talked about really is kind of basics in remote and LinkedIn networking. But if you really want to take charge of networking in a remote world, a lot of it really is simply you taking the initiative to create opportunities for networking. If you wait for whatever the next networking thing is, who knows when that'll be or who offers it or what's involved. An easy thing for you all to do is, I'm going to create my own. For example, you say, hey, I want to meet people who are interested in whatever your interest is. We're going to have a virtual coffee chat. I'll host it. I'll create a Zoom. If you're interested, pop in and we can talk about whatever that might look like, right? Now, notice you created that. You're asking other people. You may have no clue about who might join the call, or you may have no clue about the topic. You're just trying to learn more. But again, you're taking an interest in that and you're engaging with that, and you're taking the lead. Kind of similar, you may have heard of these mastermind groups, which are like very focused, concentrated kind of chats that are a little bit more focused on particular things. Hosting your own virtual mastermind group might be another way. Hosting a open Zoom session, like I just mentioned, where people can drop in. We had one here in Birmingham last year. We had there's a Birmingham People Analytics meetup. Now this was not remote specific. We did it at a bar, but you can do the exact same thing. Post something on LinkedIn, says, hey, if you're interested in this and you're in Birmingham, for example, join our Zoom session. We're going to talk more and we're going to meet new people and learn from them. LinkedIn is kind of, I approach LinkedIn as like, you got to master the basic, right? But if you really want to take it to the next level, there's all kinds of other stuff out there. I'm not a big tech person, so I'm not necessarily an expert on these, but I know that these things are out there. Slack groups, Discord channels, Twitter and X Spaces, Substacks that are all devoted to different types of careers, industries, professions. Figure out where those are. And a lot of that might be a simple search. Is there a Discord channel on X, Y, and Z? I saw one on IO Psychologist and joined that. And there's all kinds of really cool stuff that gets talked about in IO Psych. So that's an easy one. And then another thing, and this is something I've really focused on a lot as I progressed as I enter the second half of my career, is I want to help other people break into their careers. So easy thing for me is I know a lot of people who are established. I don't know a lot of people who are starting out, but if they approach me and they say, do you know somebody who might be able to help? Absolutely. It takes me about 2 minutes to make an introduction from someone who's looking for opportunities and someone who's already established and has the opportunities. Think about, is there somebody in your network that you think, whoever this person might be able to help another person? And again, it takes 2 seconds, but by making that connection, now you're building that person's network, you're building your network, and you're building the person's network that you know on the other end. What I've often found is the people who are willing to do that, if you look at their networks, they are super connected. We call them super connectors. They know people who know people who know people. And I want to end with this last point and answer any questions. You don't get jobs from those first level connections. The research is very clear. You get jobs from those second, third, and fourth level connections. So it's people who know people who know people who know people. How do you get to know those people? You got to get into those networks, develop those relationships, and the rest will come from there. Here's some resources, Greg. I know I'm running a little late, but I'd love to answer any questions we might have.
You bet. And I did drop a few of those slides into, or some of those links into the chat. So if anybody does have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. We do have a little bit of time for you. One person did ask, what was that book? Share that book again that you showed earlier.
Oh, it's not a book. It's, if you just Google 36 questions for increasing closeness. This one comes from the Berkeley Greater Good in Action, UC Berkeley. But it's a bunch of questions that you can ask to get to know people really, really quickly.
Got it. When it comes to networking, I know you said kind of scope out the room. Should they aim high? Should we aim high and go right for that CEO, or should we kind of stay within our means?
Here's the thing. The CEO is not going to have the job. The people who are going to have the jobs tend to be mid to lower level. They're going to be the people who are going to know people who know people, right? And the CEO gets bombarded with people who want to meet him or her, right? So they're used to getting it, and they'll typically have some sort of canned response, or just email so and so, or email my assistant. They're going to deflect all that, right? You're not going to get to know them very well. And what I found is most of the CEOs, they're not coming to these networking things. They're people that report to them that are coming, right? So aim lower, aim for your mid to lower level. Those are the people you really want to get to know, because those are the people who can make those connections to the top.
When it comes to LinkedIn, are you surprised how many people don't have an account?
As I would say in a business school, yes. When I have seniors and graduating in a school of business and I ask them, and about a third of the class actually has a LinkedIn, and I'm like, guys, this is the easiest thing you can do. It's like having a Facebook, but I feel like it's kind of like at this point, it's kind of like your dad telling you, like, okay, dad, like I'll get a LinkedIn, right? But you really underestimate just how useful and important it is and how much information you can get out of that and how many connections you can make very, very quickly.
And I do want to share that we do have through our office 2 LinkedIn pages for you to interact with other alumni. UAB alumni, that's just a page. It's open to anybody, has close to 1,000 individuals already in it. And then we also have a closed one that we do make sure that you have a UAB connection to, UAB Alumni Career Network. So look those up. I did drop those in the chat for people to find them as well, so they can connect. They can have kind of that shared experience as well. Dr. Gorman, thanks so much for coming back. We look forward to having you in March.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure, Greg.
You are very, very, very welcome. In a moment, I'll highlight that webinar and others. But first, just a quick reminder that those that have joined us today, this webinar was recorded. Once the replay link is ready, we're going to go ahead and send an email letting you know. As for those upcoming webinars I mentioned, coming up in a week, we'll welcome Dr. Christina Pierpoli Parker for the Science of Insomnia. On February 27th, join us for Designing Your Impactful Career as we welcome experts from Mission Collaborative and gain insight on reinvigorating your career path. Dr. Gorman will return on March 26th for Leading with Heart, the Power of Compassionate Leadership, as we take a look at the impact of empathy and understanding in leadership roles. And on April 3rd, come back for The Power of Goal Planning, a step-by-step process to making it happen. Registration is available for these and more at alumni.uab.edu/events. Let me go ahead and slide that over and join us for our 19th annual scholarship run in Crestline Village on April 12th. Support a good cause as we raise money for scholarships through this annual event. Registration for our 5K and 10Ks, fun run and virtual option are now open. Get all the details at alumni.uab.edu/run. And finally, let us know how we're doing. What did you think about today's presentation? What do you want to see in the future? The QR code you see on your screen is going to take you to a short survey where you can provide us feedback. Once again, thanks so much for joining us. And as always, go Blazers.